What's up, guys? This is Jay here with FantasyLabs, and I'm back for the second video of my new multi-lineup building series that showcases our new tools to help you succeed in NBA tournaments. In the first video I did last week, I gave a brief overview of the new features and a few examples of how you can maximize your EV and save a lot of time creating your lineups. And if you didn't catch that one, you can find a link to that video in the YouTube description below, or go ahead and find it at FantasyLabs.com, or you can just start straight with video 2, whatever works. In this video, I'll walk you through my process, most of my process for tackling an average NBA slate, and I'm using this Tuesday night 6-game slate as an example. If you're just starting to play tournaments, or you're intrigued by building multiple lineups, or if you've seen our tools and you think that it will make it a lot easier for you, then you're probably wondering kind of what GPPs you should be playing. And a really cool feature we added this season actually is the contest page, courtesy of Brian Mears. And it's where you can see details of every tournament for that night on both sites for all sports available. So it's a great way to look at what percentage goes to first if you're looking for a flatter payout, which ideally, ultimately, you want to do. I think for new people, in nearly every case, I would recommend the Quarter Arcade on DraftKings. Is a really cheap buy-in tournament, and that's something I think you should focus on if you aren't familiar with tournaments. And there's a pretty big learning curve with dealing with 100 lineups that I'll get into a little bit later. But the Quarter Arcade, is a good one to practice because it's so cheap, and it doesn't have the most glamorous prize pool, but it's kind of the perfect spot to practice building a core. You can go ahead. For today, these do fill, I believe, pretty quickly. So NBA Quarter Arcade, 25%, and the max, I believe, is 50 entries. So that's just that's the same price as extra steak and guac at Chipotle. So this is something I would do, practice on building a core. Do so in a way you won't really lose your mortgage, even if you initially suck. So I'd recommend setting exposures and building lineups to put into this tournament. And then what you can do is you can always, eventually when the games start, of course, you can click live contests here and kind of track your scores in, maybe the $4 tournament or whatever tournament really that you want to look at, and kind of see how you did. And that's a good way initially to practice without losing a lot at the beginning. And then when you find success, then you can bump up stakes. But on FanDuel, I think you want to look at these flat payouts. I mean, a good example here is the Slam, $25 entry, 10% the first, but it pays out pretty deep. So that's probably the one that you want to eventually focus on. And then the second question you might have is how often to play tournaments, and kind of what slates are the best slates to play tournaments to focus on. And there really isn't one blanket answer to this that I have. My thoughts are that if you have an edge on the field and you have proven over time to sustain a positive ROI, then you definitely have to maximize your volume. And one thing with NBA, and at every sport really, is there are plenty of late slates that lack attention because they have small prize pools. But these are really great ways to boost your ROI as a tournament player, as well as limit some risk if you're playing multiple slates per day. And then another thing with that is, with DK getting rid of late swap this season, you can make the argument that some of these late slate tourneys with relatively small prize pools are severely neglected now. A lot of pros don't have to sit around waiting for potential swaps anymore, so some are probably less likely to play late slates compared to last year. So I think this could be something of a specialty that a lot of people can kind of focus on, perfecting the contrarian lineups on 2-game slates. And then if you're not at the stage of playing that many slates yet or comfortable, or you're really just focusing on a big score, playing those massive tournaments every now and then, so you can perhaps buy a new Mercedes AMG S63 Coupe, then I'd really recommend picking your spots carefully. I'd recommend, before that, I would actually recommend playing satellites to try to get seats to whatever tourney you want to splurge on. And the main thing with this outlook is that you have to ensure you're comfortable with the slate. you're willing to put in the time and research by using all of our tools and features to help you. And I've done a few videos in the past on how to have kind of the right mindset going into tournaments, which is obviously important. Basically, if you order the cod at a steakhouse, you're probably naturally contrarian. You have the right mindset in some ways. If you get the filet every time, you're probably too chalky. And if you get the ribeye medium rare, you've probably got a good balance of both. So for the sake of this video, I'm actually going to play tonight's clutch shot on FanDuel. It's a $4 entry fee. First place gets 100K. I actually do want that Mercedes, so 100 stacks is nice, and this has a max limit of 150 entries. So one thing to do first when you're evaluating it is to kind of check, how many entries are in right now. We have 79,000 out of 147,000. These do fill pretty quick, but I'll get into this a little later of why you want to focus on how many are going and the speed at which it's going. I think it's a overlooked thing when you're creating a lot of lineups. It's pretty important to get that timing right. So let's slide over to the lab now, where I have a lot of exposures set for tonight, just kind of players I like at each position. And I'll show you guys kind of what I do to get this. This tournament has 147,000 entries, which is roughly the same amount of dollars that Mercedes is. So it's a lot, and you have to keep that in mind when building your lineups. This is an example of where you have to order the cod at the steakhouse and tell the filet to kindly F off. And I like to go position by position, really. And first thing I like to do with a tournament of this size especially is just sort by ceiling. And you can kind of see I go through, and unlike all of the players towards the bottom for most of these positions, some guys sneak in there a little bit, but generally that's kind of how I start narrowing down my field. With the tournament, I don't want guys who don't have high ceilings. I'm not going to go into too much detail on why I have exposures set on some of these certain players, because who I like really changes on a nightly basis. The overlying theme is that you want to pick your spots and kind of take aggressive stances on certain players. And I think one way you can do that, and I really recommend doing this, is sort of identifying the chalk for that night's slate. So this will in turn help you figure out which plays will be contrarian by identifying the chalk, and which plays will be low owned, and kind of allow you to capitalize on high variance guys with high ceilings. And this is a way to embrace the randomness. So to do this, I think there are two things. You can use a combination of our projected ownership, which we have, and kind of scroll through that and see which guys are expected to be high owned on this slate. And then you can sort by rating. I use the fan model for everything. It's primarily cash-based model. And while you might initially say, well, why would I use that for tournaments if it's cash-based? It's so you can kind of identify which plays might be high owned on any given slate. A lot of the times, the top guys on the model at each position will be the safest plays, guys that a lot of people will come to the same conclusion about, thus increasing their ownership. So they have, for example, good matchups, secure minutes, high usage, etc. So for these large field tournaments, we essentially want to find the opposite and hit on them in the 20% of the time they reach their ceiling, and fade the guys who are 20% to hit the floor. And this really is the main reason why your frequency of cashing tournaments is low, but your ROI is high when you do hit. And this principle is something that you really need to understand when playing tournaments to temper your expectations when you don't win 700 grand in the first week. So I have my exposure set in my player pool for who I like and who I'm taking a stance on. There are a few scenarios I'm either overweight on high variance guys like Enes Kanter, or underweight on low variance guys with limited ceilings. An example of that would be Jaren Grant. If Rondo ends up being ruled out, I don't think I have any exposure to him, and even if Rondo's ruled out, that's a guy I'm fine fading. It's those guys with limited ceilings that's where you kind of take a stand on in tournaments and fade them. So for 150 lineups max for this FanDuel tournament, I'm going to create 100 with this player pool with my set exposures, and I'm going to create my last 50 using specific cores through the My Groups feature. So for this 100, we can actually click build lineups, generate multiple lineups. Let's go ahead and do 100. And for this one, I'm going to generate by projected points. And since I don't have a core locked in, no specific core, I want to limit the diversification pretty much and basically get the true top 100 projected lineups based on who I've selected and the exposures. So we can go ahead and generate those lineups for this slate. And you can see, you can see all your lineups. You can see all your exposures on the right. And this is a spot where you can adjust any exposures if you see anything that's just off, or Anthony Morrow 31%. Do I really want that? And scenarios like that, you can go ahead and actually change the min and max exposures to what you want. Click save and go up and generate lineups again to kind of finesse your way into what you want if it didn't come out correctly. I'm pretty happy with most of these. I think you can go through the lineups and kind of look and see if any look like they're going to get in last place or whatever. You can uncheck them and discard and create more. So you can do a lot of things on this. I do recommend to look over the exposures carefully, and if something's off of what you wanted, you can just change it through here if you want. And it might be, the reason might be because you might have put like 70% Westbrook, 60% Anthony Davis, and you unchecked all of the cheap guys, and it's just not possible to fill what you want. So you have to have that in mind as well when you're setting a lot of these exposures. And then all you do is you just click Save Lineups, and that will save to your My Lineups page. And then before making the next batch of lineups, you can go ahead and clear these. And you'll see on your My Lineups page you have all your lineups here waiting for you. So let's go back to the model actually. And this is a 6-game slate, and they're usually pretty interesting, obviously because of a limited player pool relative to some larger slates. This one has a decent amount of studs, obviously Russ and Anthony Davis at the top, who are capable of producing, but we also have some game flow spots that we could avoid. And one of those I'm looking on this slate is the Cavs-Grizzlies game with Marc Gasol, shout out player of the week, resting tonight. So I don't particularly like this spread in this game. I believe currently 15.5, so I think it was 16.5 earlier, but I'm going to go ahead and deselect both these teams. I don't like that game. That's kind of taking a stance, an example of narrowing your pool, eliminating that game, hoping that it's a blowout and no players really crush value on either side. So that's something you can do. And then you can go ahead and clear all your exposures if you want that you previously set. There we go. And you can go to your My Pool. And then on a slate like this especially, and really any slate, especially smaller slates than this, like a 4 or 5 game slate, you really want to look at the slate and think who are the guys with the highest ceilings that if they hit their ceiling, I don't have them. I'm drawing dead basically. And on this slate, it's pretty easy to determine that it's Russ and Anthony Davis, the two highest in ceiling. So they're both in interesting spots tonight. Russ has had a lot of success against Portland. Anthony Davis put up 45 and 17 earlier this season against the Dubs. I do find him highly unlikely to repeat that line. And so for this first batch, this is something that I maybe want to lock in Russ and kind of fade AD here. First game Oladipo's out this season for Russ, and he gets Portland on a back-to-back. So the hope here is that this game is high scoring, which means I do want other pieces to this game. So we can go ahead and fill it in with a couple more guys. Another guy on the Thunder, I think has some upside here is Enes Kanter. And this is kind of tackling this game as it's going to be close, it's going to be high scoring, where are the points going to come from, and that's kind of where you want to start with your exposure on this slate. So in your My Pool, we can also go ahead and lock in CJ McCollum as an example. We can get Lillard as well, which leaves us really cheap with the remaining spots. So that's a scenario where you probably want to leave it at that. Let's maybe go ahead and throw in Anthony Morrow's min price. And this is a my group you can use. So you can go ahead and save this to my groups, and that's the first group you have. For the next core, you can go back and you create a different group, save it as well. So for this one, let's see if that's saved. There we go. Okay, so my pool, and let's go ahead and lock in just the two highest players in Russell Westbrook and Anthony Davis, and you have very limited money for the rest, but that could be a group you could save as well in the chance that they both hit their massive ceilings. I'll do one more core before finishing this video up, getting these lineups in, and I would like to get a piece of that Knicks game. I think that one has the ability. A lot of people are going to be looking at Portland, Oklahoma City, and the Pelicans game as well. So Suns, Pelicans, and this is a spot. If we go back to my pool, we can actually just let's go ahead and just put these two teams in and kind of pick your spots here. So I think on the Knicks side, you can do the big three: Rose, Melo, Porzingis. On the Suns side, yeah, the Suns Knicks game. Sorry, not Pelicans. And then on the Suns side, we can do probably Bledsoe, and as a cheap option, maybe a little bit of PJ Tucker. I would be fine with Chandler. Either Chandler or Tucker is the other, just in the off chance that Len is out. Actually, let's go ahead and just do Chandler here. And this could be another group you have. So you have 5,900 for your remaining 4 spots, and you can save that to groups as well. So for these last 50 lineups, you can set your exposures to each of these groups. Let's do 25 to this one, 25, and 50%. And then we can go ahead and optimize build lineups with my groups. And let's do 50 and sort by projected points. Okay, and this is probably because my player pool is very limited. So let's go ahead and do all and quick action like all. Oh, actually, I'm a donkey. It's because I didn't select all the games. So let's go back and deselect the Cavs game like I did earlier, and let's go to my groups and build lineups with my groups, and we'll do 50. Okay, so we got our lineups now with these cores, these groups, which is really nice. So now you have to do is save lineups to your my lineups page again, and they'll go on the my lineups page, and we can just click there. And yeah, with that last one, you can just like earlier, you can save those or you can adjust the percentages off to the side if you see things you don't like. You can also, for that one, since you do have built-in cores, you can increase your diversification meter quite a bit on that. For this kind of smaller slate, I already eliminated 1 game, and I think it's fine to keep it at 2. But on a larger slate with a lot more options, you can definitely, when you have a core built in, you can increase the diversification slider. So now all you have to do is you're on your My Lineups page, and you can just click Export, which saves it to a CSV, and you can head on over to FanDuel and find your shot. So earlier I mentioned how important it is to keep track of how many seats are left. So there's still a lot of seats left. I'm giving myself a lot of time, but this is something, especially when building multiple lineups on FantasyLabs, you want to keep track of. There are 2 main reasons why you want to wait kind of as long as reasonably possible to build and upload your teams. And first, the main thing is the projections are updating throughout the day to reflect on any pieces of information regarding player minutes and or injuries. So that's something is being adjusted, and you want the best info available when you're building your lineup. So that's the primary reason to wait. And second, you want to have the ability to change your exposures directly from FantasyLabs in case something happens. So I have the FantasyLabs NBA feed up, and we haven't gotten any news in a while. This is kind of the dead time. We probably have about 40 minutes before some news starts coming in. And then, if you get news early, you want to be able to change your exposures on the site before you create your multiple lineups. It's a lot more difficult to do that through FanDuel, especially. On DraftKings, you can at least see all your lineups on your lineups page, but FanDuel, it's very difficult to go through each and every lineup. So keeping track of how many are in and how many are left relative to the time of day is really tricky. It's hard to wait too long, of course, and miss out on all the work you did by not entering in time. So you should try to aim for that perfect window of allowing yourself adequate time on both ends. And on FanDuel, you'll have to utilize quick player replace. So let's go ahead and enter these into the shot, and all you do is click enter, and you'll just upload lineups from CSV and choose file, and it should be no. There we go. Alright, and then click upload, enter 150 lineups that we made, and that's it. So, we make it as easy as possible to enter these, to build these and enter these. So now, when these are entered is really when you kind of just stay tuned to the feed until lineups lock and adjust accordingly if anything major goes down. I have exposures tonight on Nikola Vucevic, Rajon Rondo, Bismack Biyombo, and Alex Len, who are all questionable. So that's something that I'm going to make sure I keep an eye on, and I'm going to have to pivot if any are ruled out at this point, via quick play replace. I've already kind of made my bed with my exposures on here, so it's kind of too late to go back. If you had to, you would have to delete every single entry that I just put in, which takes a really long time. So you have all your lineups here. Oh, you actually can. This is similar to DK. I forgot. They kind of upgraded, but you can. What I would do almost is, let's say, if someone gets ruled out, I like to just kind of, instead of doing a quick player replace and just, depending on how much time you have left, I would Control F and find that player and edit each lineup individually. Depending on how much time you have left, of course. But so to do that, you would just click quick player replace, and let's say, Biyombo's out. That's a spot you'd have to quick player replace. And maybe you just transition him into Kyle O'Quinn, who's flashed some upside lately. Missed last game, but it's a spot where you could do that, or you could Control F, find all your Biyombo lineups, and manually adjust them yourselves. So that's something that obviously is a lot easier to manage from FantasyLabs, and it also is more accurately reflected with the new models updated. So it gives you a better chance to succeed in this tournament. So that's it for this video, guys, and in the next video I'm going to analyze a late slate DraftKings tournament as an example to highlight contrarianism, especially when you have extremely limited options, and how you can do that by utilizing our models and our tools to increase your EV. So until then, check out the Quarter Arcade if you're new to the site and want to build multiple lineups, and good luck, guys.